All right. Hello, everyone. This is our sixth monthly Lake Ord chat that we're bringing to you today as an outreach program of the College of Natural Resources at UW-Stevens Point. Our goal is to provide educational resources and support to the broader community in regard to lake health. And as you all know, Wisconsin is home to over 15,000 lakes, and over 750 of these lakes have an organization that protects and manages the health of the lake for current and future generations. There's a lot of information we try to get out to you, and we're trying this year to do this in a creative and fun way through these monthly Lake Org chats. Please let us know how we're doing by completing the feedback survey linked on YouTube. We hope you'll join us for future topics, and you can also look back at the past ones as well and take a look at those in YouTube as well. So we will get started. In this episode, we'll be focusing on the importance of using committees, whether you're a lake association or a lake district. My name is Sarah Winju. I'm the Leadership and Capacity Development Specialist for the Extension Lakes program at UW-Stevens Point, and I'll be helping to facilitate these chats each month.
And I'm Eric Olson. I'm the Director of Extension Lakes, and I'm also helping to facilitate the conversations on a monthly basis.
And I'm Peter Jensen. I'm with the Eagle Spring Lake Management District in Waukesha County. I'm the former chairperson there. I'm also a member of Lake Leaders Crew 15, which completed its training in 2024. And I've been a member of the Capacity Committee for years and years.
Thanks, Peter. So I'm Dave, and I'm honored to represent the Sand Lake Association, which is primarily in Rusk County, but we have our tail end of the lake down in Chippewa County. I am also a member of Crew 15 from the Lake Leaders and a longtime member of the Capacity team. Go ahead, Leanna.
Good morning. My name is Leanna Spencer. For the last 5 years, I've been the lake manager for the Lake Ripley Management District in Jefferson County. I am also a graduate of Lake Leaders, Crew 14, and I'm happy to be here this morning.
Thank you all for joining us. You'll all probably recognize Peter and Dave, who've been on many of these monthly chats, and we like to have a special guest join us every month. So Leanna is our special guest this month to talk more about her experience and use of committees in the Lake District. So thank you all for joining us. And let's see, we'll move on. So we came up with this topic of committees because we know the importance of committees. We want to make sure that we discuss those, the importance of them, but we also want to talk about structure and different roles too. And this came up because a lot of us have committees, we use committees, we know how beneficial they are. And I know from past experience, I've been on a board and I went to the meetings, I voted, I read all the materials, I was ready to participate. And then I really wasn't tasked with anything outside of the meetings, or I wasn't asked to use my skills to benefit the organization. And I really wanted to do that, but there weren't any committees. And so I thought, man, that would have been a really great opportunity to have some different committees so that people were able to participate in other ways and give back to the organization. So we thought this topic was important. And Leanna, why don't you start us off with telling us a little bit about your district, how you use committees, a little bit background of your organization.
Of course. The Lake Ripley Management District is a lake district, which is a local unit of government, and we have taxing authority. The purpose of our committees is to get work done more efficiently by allowing a subset of people to collectively work on a project, such as creating a budget or researching and investigating potential land acquisitions, or to even create recommendations for the board of directors. In my case, it's the Lake Ripley Management District Board of Directors. This helps our board make informed decisions about multiple multi-layered projects without having to spend hours discussing each topic at board meetings, which can become extremely lengthy. Additionally, it's a good way to get other community members that aren't on the board of directors involved, and they could have an itch for serving their community, and this is a perfect way for them to jump in and do something like that. They get to serve on a committee, which can be less time intensive and less work than serving on the board of directors, which is often a good stepping stone to get some of those folks interested in the board of directors as well. Our committees are formed through a resolution of the board of directors with the language for the conception of the committees coming directly from our bylaws. The structure of these committees is similar to a board of directors. There's a chairman, a secretary, commissioners. I'm also involved in every committee. I'm there just as a representative of the Lake District to help things move properly and smoothly. The Lake District actually has 7 different committees. We have a land acquisition committee, a budget committee, a cost share committee, an HR committee, a hiring committee, an audit committee, and the weed harvesting oversight committee. I know it's a lot, but they all play important and meaningful roles, different roles. Each committee does. Most of them are pretty self-explanatory, but I can talk briefly about some of the specifics of each committee as we get further into our discussion.
Leanna, I have a quick question. With all of those
Yeah.
committees, how many people do you think are involved?
Yeah,
Total.
on each, normally there's 3 to 5 members that serve on each committee. There's a chairman of each committee and a secretary of each committee, and then 1 to 2 or 3 commissioners, depending on how popular that committee is. Our budget committee, for example, doesn't get a lot of interest because it's a lot of work, but something like our land acquisition committee is popular because people are interested about the potential land acquisitions that we have going on in our watershed. And so more residents seem to be wanting to join that committee.
So you have 7 committees, at least 5 people on each. So you have between probably 35 and 50 people, I mean, in total participating in these committees.
Yeah, I would say the minimum's 3, and a couple of our committees do have 3. So I would say that 3 to 5, and on 7 committees, yeah, 35 to 40 people, I would guess.
Okay.
We do have some repeats. Some of our board members like to hop on committees too, just so they can stay up to date on specific, pet projects of theirs or something like that. But we also have a lot of residents that join our committees as well.
Got it. Peter, as another district, how many committees do you have and what is your structure like?
We really only have one standing committee, and that's the nominating committee for the board. The rest of our committees are basically all ad hoc committees that would be appointed for specific projects. If, for example, we're going to be working on a dam, there may be a committee that is formed to deal with dam issues and other things. So it's a relatively fluid issue versus the more formal issue that we have at Lake Ripley.
Yeah, and as a lake association, we have it's a bit less formalized structure. We have a committee chair or a subcommittee chair, and then we have volunteers. That chair can delegate things like taking notes and things, but generally speaking, they kind of run that committee. We do have in our bylaws that we can, number one, and should, number two, have committees to help the board make decisions that represent the entire lake organization and the riparian owners around the lake. So in our bylaws, we do dictate that we can have them, and we have found them extremely beneficial in a couple of areas. And we only really have 2 that are ongoing, but we have like Peter had some ad hoc. Our audit committee, they come in, they audit, they report, they go away. And we try to change that membership up on a regular basis. On our the 2 that are always going on, one is fish habitat. And we have fish habitat and fish rehabilitation, habitat rehabilitation projects going on throughout the year. So that is a committee that then reports back. We have Clean Boats, Clean Water Committee, and there's a chair to that, and they report back. And then we have a social committee that, again, that one's very informal, but they organize things like coffee on the dock and making sure that our annual meeting, we have a potluck, making sure that appropriate things are brought to the potluck.
Okay, so quick question for all of you. We have here posted that having committees involves more people so you can spread out responsibilities and you're including and involving more than just the board. Do you ever have people, and do you encourage people to just come to check out the committees, see what it's all about before they commit to really joining that committee? Do you encourage that? And what is that like? Because I know I might want to just see what a meeting is like what do you all do? And how long does this take before I actually commit to it? So I wondered if any of you could talk about that.
Well, as a Lake District, all of our committee meetings are governed by state law. They're all open meetings, so the public is always encouraged to attend and listen to what's going on. I don't think there's any requirement that a potential committee member attend any of these sessions. But I think, if you have people who are interested, who are routinely showing up to various group meetings and things like that, you should make note of that because they are obviously potential members to fill a vacancy on that group. And of course, any contributions of information that they may have are very welcome at the committee level, which is generally easier to handle than it would be, for example, than at a formal board meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, additionally, we have a good base of volunteers and we get together each Monday. We work on a buckthorn management project or whatever the time of year allows. And during those times, I like to discuss our committees and what we have going on at the district so they can kind of understand what we're doing on each committee. And if there's something that tickles their fancy, they tend to ask me about that. I also love to approach everybody that comes to my monthly board meetings, all my residents. I love going up and being like, hey, Jimmy, he's my chairman, but I'll just use him so I don't call anybody out. Hey, Jimmy, how are you? And we get to talking too. And when I understand what their personal interests are, I can guide them. Hey, do you know that we have a budget committee or a cost share committee? You like doing shoreline projects along the lake? We would love to have you. So I try to do that often as well.
Yeah, and when we recruit for our committees, or when one of the board members or a member of the association suggests that we need to dig a little deeper into a topic, those are generally brought up at our standard meetings. But people can message us or they can just send us an email saying, hey, there's something that we think needs to get addressed. Can we talk about adding a committee to do exactly that? Associations are a little bit less formal. We don't have to invite the public, but we do because number one, the more people you have informed and engaged, the better the decision making will be, we think. And number two, there are certain rules to getting grants that you have to have a public boat landing. You have to, in your bylaws, not just allow members. You have to allow the general public. And why not? Right? The more people that you get involved, the better off your committee work will be, and the better off your resolution of whatever that committee's work will turn out to be.
So we'll move on to the next slide, unless Eric,
I
did
have
you want to
one
jump in
quick
there?
nuts and bolts
Sure.
question, kind of for all three of our lake organization people, which is, how often do these committees really meet? Is it set in stone? Do they meet when needed? Do they meet one time a year? I'm wondering what the variations might look like.
Yeah, I'll take the lead on that one. Our land acquisition committee, it kind of depends. Last year, we probably met a dozen times because we did have a potential piece of land that abutted our lake that we really wanted. So that one met quite a few times. Our budget committee meets about 3 times a year because we need to get the budget figured out before our annual meeting. So we hash that out in about 3 meetings. Our HR committee, very rare. Our hiring committee, again, pretty rare. We have our employees come back each year. Thank goodness. I'm really happy about that. So we don't use that one a lot. I would say those, once every other year. Our audit committee is a group of electors of our district, and that meets once a year to go through all of our books. And our weed harvesting oversight meets a couple times a year. Our cost share committee meets about 5 times a year. So really it varies. We have a lot of variation depending on what the projects are what ongoing projects there are.
Yeah,
It
same.
seems like that would matter to recruiting people to serve on these committees. They want to know, well, how often are we going to meet? Yeah.
Right. Ours is similar. It's very the fish habitat committee, they are the most engaged because we're doing the most work in that area. Our other committees very much ad hoc, once or twice a year.
So even though you aren't meeting every 2 weeks or even every month, it's not too much time. Some people may be saying, oh, but there's just so many challenges. This is a lot to take on. So we wanted to talk here about both benefits and also the challenges.
Well, some residents may think that the establishment of committees is a really good idea. Some residents may not. We all know that change is difficult for some people, and it can be reflected when you have a committee structure that is proposed. And one thing that I found is that is a particular problem when you have an old guard that's present on the governing structure that feels that a committee may lessen their prestige or their power. Knowing that you may get resistance is just part of the process. And just because you get pushback, it doesn't mean by any means that not establishing committees is not a good idea. You just have to apply that old adage that if at first you don't succeed, try again. By pointing out, I think, the benefits of committees, I think you have a good chance of winning over some of that resistance that may be present. And of course, some of the benefits that include, you broaden the base of the organization to get a more diverse group of opinions on subjects. And I think a lot of the lakes, this can be one of the key benefits. You have residents that are full time there. You have summer residents that come on in. They may have entirely different views on a subject, and a committee is a perfect location to air some of those differences, work out them, and then present them to the board. Allowing people to explore the governing structure of the organization and understand how things work, I think, is one of the key benefits. There are an awful lot of folks that, maybe move into an area that simply don't know how the Lake District is administered, or other groups of organization. To me, one of the key benefits is it allows a training program for people to move up into the organization. That eliminates the problem of somebody getting elected, say, to a board position, who, quite frankly, has no experience in the Lake District, may not even understand the laws and rules and regulations. By working on a committee, you get to know the organization, you get to explore those things, you get to meet the people that are involved, and you can really determine whether or not that's something that they are going to have a greater interest in moving up of the organization. And I think one of the key benefits of a committee is that it shows lake residents or other people really how much work is really involved in doing all these things. Lake District does not run on its own. It takes a lot of time and effort on the part of those involved, and getting people to understand the amount of work that's involved, I think, is important. So again, when they decide to move up, they're not caught off guard. Leanna, what's your experience with this?
Yeah, one of the main benefits for us is not having to get the whole board together, all 7 people, to discuss one project. It saves us so much time, is the biggest benefit that we get out of it. For example, our budget committee, that takes us 3 or 4 hours at each meeting to go line item by line item, discussing why it needs to be raised, lowered, or kept the same. So after that, we, produce this preliminary budget and give a synopsis of what we've discussed in our committee meeting to our board of directors, who can then make an educated, informed decision. So the major benefit, is it saves us time all throughout. Additionally, these committees can gather like-minded individuals that are good at a specific topic or subject to knock out these projects that don't necessarily need the whole board. For example, our cost share committee, we do cost share projects along our shoreline for riprap or rain gardens, to prevent erosion, things like that. And 2 of our committee members are really passionate about this and have done it for many years. So to be able to have their expertise in passing along that generational knowledge is huge for that specific committee. So things like that is really beneficial. The only challenges that I seem to find is recruitment. Unless you're begging your board members, sometimes there isn't enough volunteers to want to serve on these committees. and scheduling conflicts. Everybody has full-time jobs still. They have kids or grandkids or what have you. And so it'll take us a couple weeks to get a meeting together. But these committees, we couldn't run the Lake District without them. And like Peter said, it shows how much work a Lake District actually does when we have 7 committees, 4 of them that meet regularly to knock out projects that the board can then decide on and not waste 3 hours hashing out every detail.
I like to think of it when they report back either to our general meetings or to the board as they're going to give us that 10,000-foot view that we need to help us make a decision. And they've done all the deep digging and come with those recommendations that then we can try to move forward with. Fish projects are a big one for us, like I said.
Yeah, and I think most lake groups are not as fortunate as Lake Ripley in that they don't really have a staff person. So when the question comes up, who's going to do this? It's hard to say, well, it's just the board, doing everything. I think you need committees to spread out that workload to make sure, as Peter said, that people understand what's all involved in it, and it's not falling completely on the board. But I think I also recognize what Peter said about some people resisting it. I mean, do you send things to committee? Sometimes I think there's a theory that people send it to committee to die. Someone brings to the board an idea, like they want to do something, and you say, oh, great, well, we're going to refer that to the budget committee and we'll let them figure out if it's even feasible, but then it never comes back or something. But I don't know if that really happens in practice. I think people send things to committee because they're like, look, this is going to require more fleshing out before the board would make an action on something.
Mm-hmm.
All right, should we move on? We're moving on. We're moving on to, communicating and reporting. How do we get people to know that these committees exist, when the meetings are, and also what are the requirements when it comes to reporting out?
Well, I think that, most committees, report to the governing body, whether it's an association or a lake district, with recommendations and suggestions from their sphere of influence. However, depending upon what the organization is of that body, some committees may be given independent functions. For example, a human resource committee may be given the authority to investigate personnel complaints, particularly those that might involve members of the governing body. And one little suggestion is you might want to check your insurance policy because there may be factors in that policy that require certain functions to be maintained by an independent body in order to maintain your liability coverage. Another example might be an audit committee may have the authority to oversee budgeting and potential policy violations. Each organization really has to decide what are their goals and the limits of each committee based upon their needs. There isn't one cookie cutter approach to this. You identify and you develop an organization and reporting structure that meets your needs, depending upon whether you're a lake district, association, the size of your organization, and other factors that come on in.
Yeah, for us, even though it's a committee, we are still required to follow Robert's rules and orders. So Robert's rules of order, pardon me. So we still have open meetings, have open records, all that good stuff. Our agendas get published around town in 3 separate different locations. It gets published to our website. Our residents can subscribe to notices. So when we do publish it on our website, it can get sent directly to their email. Any meeting minutes that have been approved by any committee board also get published online so they can keep up on what has happened previously in our meetings. All agendas, meeting minutes, materials are prepared for each meeting. And each committee reports to the board of directors for the Lake Ripley Management District, and I'm sure for Peter as well. And every decision made by a committee must be approved by a board of directors. So it's always a preliminary approval of whatever the project is. And that's important. It needs to have that end-all decision by the larger group, the board of directors, before anything can move further.
Yeah, and in our bylaws, as I mentioned before, we have the kind of that public notice. Some associations may not have that public notice of information, and then how they report that all out, that's going to vary depending on the association and what is written in the bylaws. We've chosen to make sure that all of our meetings are open to the public. We want to encourage that, like I said earlier. You're building a community of people that want to protect whatever source of water they believe in and care about. So the more you get involved, more open communications there are. Back to the reporting, we include those minutes in our annual, or our minutes that we post on our website. So just keeping it very open, and we did purposefully have it in our bylaws that those would be open.
We also like to send out in our Ripples, we have a quarterly newsletter that we send. And occasionally in one of those editions, we like to put in there that we have committee openings for members if they'd like to serve, or, an update on whatever committee has been their project, what it's been following. So we also like to publish it on our social media and outreach that way.
I do suspect that for a lot of lake districts, having to follow open meetings law and open records law is seen as maybe a barrier to creating more formal committees, because someone has to do that work. Someone has to actually put together the agenda ahead of time. They have to post that agenda. Someone has to take some notes, some minutes, and record those minutes. And that just, it's not as easy as just saying, well, we're going to get together and talk about these things. You actually have to plan it out a bit ahead of time. And I think Ripley is a fortunate lake, again, to have a staff person who takes on a lot of that work, right, Leanna? Like, that's part of your duties as the lake manager.
Yes, that is absolutely my duty. I manage every committee in every aspect. If I think there's a new committee that needs to be formed, I discuss that with my chairman. And that actually, it's in our bylaws, but it has to go to our annual meeting where the electors actually approve that committee. And yeah, I manage and organize and operate every single aspect of every single committee. But even though I say it like that, it is a lot of work up front, but the amount of work that we produce in those meetings far outweighs any posting or meeting minutes. So I'm very grateful for committees. They take us a long way.
Sure.
Yeah.
Eric, you bring up a very good point with some of your comments there. And I think what it points out is that, if you're going to form a committee and you're going to have committee members be functioning in an efficient fashion, they need to be trained. They need to be educated. And for example, what are the open records? What do I have to keep? What communications, are open to the public? These are all things that can come to a surprise to people. And you don't want to have your committee members all of a sudden find that they're in violation of the open records law by not keeping emails or text messages or other things, because those violations become personal charges rather than corporate charges against the organization. Having a good understanding and a good training program, and having the committee's purpose specifically spelled out, hopefully in writing, so that people know exactly what their rules are and their limitations and what their charges are, I think are an important part of the committee formation process.
Sure.
Is there a formal process to get rid of a committee? Like, we don't need this committee anymore. We're going to phase it out. Or do you just phase it out?
That would be
Yeah,
a responsibility of the board or the governing organization.
Yeah, so for instance, like we needed a bunch of help around installing a boat monitoring system at our boat landing last year, and we needed to decide a bunch of things. So we did all that work, we did all that effort. We finished that project, and thus the committee went away. And now the roles and responsibilities, the duties that came out of that actually fall into the fish habitat group.
we've never come across that issue. And knock on wood, I hope not to, but I think that they would just kind of fall by the wayside. I'm not sure it would be a dissolution of the committee because it might be needed in the future, but I'm not sure. I know for sure that obviously if the electors voted to dissolve the Lake District, then obviously all committees would also be included in that. But interesting question. I haven't come across that one yet.
And I think Leanna kind of hit on it when she said that some committees meet every couple of years, then it's just a question of keeping track of who's supposed to be on that committee and making sure they're still around. But there's no requirement that these committees have to meet every year even. Contrast that to the Lake District Board, which by law, the board is supposed to meet at least quarterly, and a lot of lake districts meet more often.
Quarterly. Haha.
Now, you're keeping track of who's on each committee and all the committees. That's something that if it's on your website, public, right? That's an easy way to keep tabs on who's on which committee and what committees exist. So,
Yeah, that's a good point. I keep a Word document of all the standing committees and who serves on them because sometimes it is 3 years and I'm like, who was on the hiring committee? So yeah, definitely keeping that in a document somewhere at your organization that everybody can access is important. Good call.
so we wanted to, even though we've already talked a lot about some examples of committees, we've already listed a bunch. Here's just a list of some of those committees that some organizations have. And I snipped out some examples from the Long Lake Preservation Association, Washburn County. So thank you, LLPA, for providing some of these. They have a great outline of all of their committees and an explanation of what those committees do and why they exist. So I'm not sure if Peter, if you want to jump in here about the different, some of the different committees.
This is something, that each organization, is going to tailor according to their needs. And I think, what some of the more common ones that you might find is a finance and budget committee, looking at the various aspects of how to spend money. You may have an audit committee, and the audit committee may also be involved in setting financial policies and procedures. If you have employees, a human resources committee, even though it may meet very infrequently, I think is important, particularly in developing an HR policy. HR policies are one of those protective documents that, hopefully 95% of what's in that policy book you'll never use, but if something happens, they're the sort of things that are very, very important. That kind of follows up also with a regulatory compliance committee that may be involved in not necessarily dealing with some of the regulatory compliance, but seeing that that you are compliant with certain things. For example, the state requirements and the federal requirements that you have a written safety plan. If you have dams, having an emergency action plan and an inspection and operations manual, those sorts of things. Again, those are very dependent upon the organization, but looking at this as a way to spread the workload, assure your compliance, and help out the organization as a whole. It takes quite a burden off of the board, which generally has their hand full with a lot of other things. I don't know, Dave, do you have any other comments regarding committees that you would have or recommend?
No, I think we've done a good job of outlining the whys and the benefits. We couldn't do what we do on our lake without a couple of those committees. There just isn't enough time for the board to dig deep and manage like our lake, our fish habitat work. They're out there doing researching, working with an organization within Rusk County that does a ton of local projects, and they fund a lot for us called the WRA. And being able to tie all those groups together to come to a project that we define twice a year for the lake, there's no way the board would be able to do that work. And without that committee, we've seen the benefits of this committee by enhancing our fish habitat, and growing our population of fishes in the lake over time. So yeah, we feel they're very important.
I think
Yeah.
it's funny, Sarah, that you pulled the Long Lake Preservation Association committees, because I was involved with that group 25 years ago, and these committees weren't the ones that they had. They had like 4 different committees, and I even helped them think through like, what committees do you want? I think the nice thing about committees is that you can change that structure over time. This isn't really set in stone per se, but every once in a while, the board gets a chance to think about like, hey, is this working for us? How do we want to change this? So by no means are you set in terms of the committees that you would have either. Those can evolve. And I'd also point out, you can only really have as many committees as you have volunteers to support or people willing to step up and serve on those committees. There's lots of lake organizations that are really small in terms of even the size of lake that they're working on. So yeah, it wouldn't make sense for them to have many committees. But when you start to get into hundreds of homes around the lake, they can be leveraged again to get more people involved. So the number of committees you have might depend on the size of your lake.
One of our unique committees is our weed harvesting committee. And we have a weed harvester on our lake. We have a weed harvesting program. So we harvest for invasive species, Eurasian water milfoil, and curly leaf pondweed that are in Lake Ripley. And when we get that committee together, it's nice because we'll all go out on the lake and look at the plants together and the community of plants together, and it helps us inform our aquatic plant management plan. So even though it's a weed harvesting committee and we are focused on what the weed harvesters are going to do, it also has a different purpose. So they can be multi-layered in their purposeness for the committees.
Thank you all. So with all of that information, we wanted to provide a short list of best practices, and this is just a start, knowing that there's probably a lot that we can add to this, but we wanted to provide something. And the first best practice is start small, like we were just talking about. Identify maybe 1 or 2 committees that you want to start with, that so you can try it out, make sure you have enough volunteers that to participate on those committees, and that you get things going on a positive note before you form too many committees. And jump into as I go through these, if you all have anything to add. We've already mentioned to make sure that you list those committees somewhere for your members and others to see, so that they know that they exist. So either on your website and newsletters, just so that they can reference those and learn more about the opportunities. We've already talked about posting meeting notices, whether you're required to do so or not. It's probably, it can be a good practice. It can be a good practice to get others involved and to know what's going on around the lake. We want to strive for inclusive meeting locations, make sure that people have that these locations are accessible, that everyone can access them, and that they're in a place that people feel comfortable, and they want to and are able to get to. So thinking about those meeting locations ahead of time, and that's not just for committee meetings, that's for any meetings that you're having. Identifying a different person to lead each committee. I think we've already talked about that a little bit too, is making sure that there's different people serving on these committees, so you don't experience burnout of people having too much to do or being involved in too many different committees. Reporting out at meetings, making sure that people know what you do in those committee meetings, and that their voices were heard. And then also inviting diverse perspectives, making sure that people from all different backgrounds, different people around your lake, age groups, have the ability to participate, because they all bring different perspectives and ideas to the table. And as we've talked about, we encourage and appreciate those diverse perspectives as they make our organizations stronger. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Lake Ripley Management District has been a district for 34 years. So don't feel overwhelmed when I rattle off all of these committees that we have. It is important to start small, figure out where it will be most meaningful to create that committee and spend that time. And your association or district will grow. So just know that we've been established a while, and not to freak out when I rattle off all these committees and say how great they all are. It is important to start small. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you. You can reach out to any of like Peter, Dave, or Leanna too if you have questions about committees at your district or your association. They are there to answer questions and to provide their experiences. Any last minute comments before we close out? All right, we try to keep these chats short, although we're not always successful in that. So hopefully this one was short enough for everyone. And we do want to thank you all for participating, Peter, Dave, and Leanna, for providing your experience and your expertise. Thank you all to those who are listening. Make sure you provide us feedback about these monthly chats, and you can do so via the feedback form linked in YouTube. Provide us some comments so we can continue to improve on them. Next month, July's chat will be focused on creating and changing boundaries for Lake Districts. So this will be specifically for our Lake District audience. And let us know what other topics you'd like to see in the future. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it's for groups that are maybe thinking about forming a lake district as well. So if that's something your lake association is contemplating, that discussion on how to think about boundaries will be helpful.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.